public cat announcement. Emily is on the couch, and Ellie is on the ottoman, thinking about how she can slide into my lap. Hello, and welcome to, or back to, my channel. I'm Kit, and there goes Ellie. And here we talk about harmful beliefs and ideas promoted by certain influencers, content creators, and so on. And today, we're going to educate Matt Walsh. Again. Before we get into it, I would like to note that I don't know Matt, and these are my thoughts and opinions on the content he puts out for public consumption. That being said, thank you for clicking on this video, and I would like to give extra thanks to my patrons. Links to my socials and Patreon are below, along with sources and resources. And now, on to the reason we're all here. Matt Walsh is one of the commentators at the Daily Wire, and last month he posted a video asking why the media is suddenly praising polyamory, and as someone who's been in polyamorous relationships, it caught my attention. And I might have clickbaited a bit. We're not going to be educating Matt. He knows perfectly well that polyamory is not all the things he accuses it of in his video, and he doesn't care. Instead, we're going to look at how he talks about polyamory to his audience, and as this strikes me as a pattern with Daily Wire employees, we'll also be delving into this topic next week, albeit with a different Daily Wire employee and subject. I'm pretty sure everyone knows what polyamory is by this point, but just in case, polyamory is the practice of having multiple intimate relationships. And I am no expert, for which reason I'll leave resources below if anyone is interested in learning more. And everyone does polyamory differently, but what Matt describes is not polyamory. To hear him tell it, polyamorous folks are coerced into it by leftist elites, apparently, and they're all miserable serial cheaters and child abusers, because in the tradcon world, everyone who isn't straight and cis, and apparently now monogamous, is both miserable and abusive. He sets the scene by talking about a glowing profile Love Don't Judge did on a polycule some years ago. And it's worth mentioning that he tries to press this idea that polyamory is being presented as something good and unique and, apparently, something we should all be doing, even though none of the articles came close to any such thing, and he contradicts himself in the same sentence.
Indeed, even in these propaganda pieces meant to promote polyamory, still the majority of the word count is devoted to explaining how the participants deal with their resentment and jealousy. So jealousy, by their own account, is an ever-present feature of their lives.
So these propaganda pieces are mostly about the resentment and jealousy polyamory creates? Did he think that one through? Last I knew, propaganda was to make something sound better than it actually is. If you're doubting that the articles were all about resentment and jealousy, your instincts are correct. Matt trusts that he can just say whatever and his audience will buy it, and judging from the comments on that video, he was right. Also, this is another thing I've noticed. Anything describing something that, for instance, Matt doesn't like, it's not an article, it's not a video, it's not getting to know an alternative way of living. It's propaganda. It's pushing an agenda on society, and that is so ridiculous. It's like if I wrote an article about why I have cats and people decided that was actually me saying cats are superior and no one should have dogs. The paranoia Matt and his fellows are stoking is unreal and honestly frightening. Over the past decade or so, conservatives have been working to create a fear and distrust of anyone who is other. If someone does something they don't do and or don't want to do, if someone is different, there's automatically a suspicion cast upon them. Matt calls upon that suspicion in this video, as his reason for bringing up the polycule right away is to tell us that one of the men was arrested for abusing the newborn of the woman and one of the other men in the group. And this is not the only time Matt alludes to the idea that polyamorous people are more likely to abuse children.
By the way, by focusing on the unhappiness of the adults involved, I don't mean to suggest that their suffering is the most dire side effect or consequence of polyamory. No, I mean, as we saw at the top, by far the worst thing is the untold misery and trauma and suffering and abuse and worse suffered by the children who are brought into and brought up in these chaotic, degenerate, and dysfunctional environments.
There is no evidence to support this assertion that polyamorous relationships are more dangerous to children. Matt just needs his audience to believe that's true because "they're a danger to children" sounds better than "I don't like it." Matt covers all his bases in this video. In addition to the apparently mandatory "these people do something that I don't think is normal, so obviously they're child abusers," he also mocks polyamorous people. In short, they're unattractive, they talk too much, and they're boring. And on the off chance you might somehow leave his video thinking polyamory is something you might like to look into, well, We're not done yet, and the first thing you need to know is that would make you weak. Someone in one of the handful of articles he borrowed for this video likened their relationships to marathons, and Matt had a few things to say about that.
At least marathons take commitment and perseverance. And those are the two things that polyamorous people absolutely avoid at all costs. Being polyamorous isn't hard in the sense that marathons are hard. These kind of relationships are hard in the sense that it's hard to be a heroin addict, in the sense that it's hard to be a pathological liar because you have to keep up with all the lies. It's hard not because you're taking on a challenge or you're doing something difficult but worthwhile, but because you are a weak person following your most base desires, entirely unwilling to control your urges or strive for virtue. That's the kind of hard we're talking about.
Now, I don't know Matt personally, but based on this and his comments throughout this video, I think he believes romantic relationships are about sex and polyamory is about sex. That is not true. As mentioned earlier, polyamory is about multiple intimate relationships. Whether or not sex is involved is incidental to that. And yes, maintaining multiple relationships is more difficult than just maintaining one. I don't know if I would liken it to a marathon, but to think that polyamorous people lack commitment and perseverance is laughable. Not in the least because of the attitudes around polyamory, which Matt is doing his best to perpetuate. And, funnily enough, in this video, Matt gets upset about people doing things that indicate their commitment to their partners, like sharing Google Calendars and going to couples therapy. So we've mocked polyam people, declared them secretly miserable, and said they're a danger to children. What's next? Well, I think this part might be my favorite.
They cannot enact their agenda and exercise total control over a culture that is comprised of strong, loving, individual family units where children are raised by caring mothers and protective fathers. They cannot control. If that's the way society is set up, there's nothing they could do. The elites, for all their money and power, would be rendered nearly impotent if that's the kind of society we had, which is why they have to tear down the family and have been trying to do so for many decades. And tragically, they have largely succeeded. They have succeeded anyway on a general level. But I can tell you they have not torn down my family, and they never will. And hopefully they haven't torn down yours either. Whatever you do, don't let them.
This is low-key hilarious.
The polyamories are coming to your house. They're going to make you get a girlfriend and your wife get a boyfriend.
On a more serious note, this sounded very familiar. And look at that, it's part of Umberto Eco's 14 Properties of Fascism. Fascist societies rhetorically cast their enemies as, at the same time, too strong and too weak. On the one hand, fascists play up the power of certain disfavored elites to encourage in their followers a sense of grievance and humiliation. On the other hand, fascist leaders point to the decadence of those elites as proof of their ultimate feebleness in the face of an overwhelming popular will. Unsurprising, Matt does call himself a theocratic fascist in his Twitter bio, but these people are just living their lives, and he's calling on his audience to see them as part of a sinister plot, a deeper evil that needs to be resisted. And I honestly don't understand how anyone can take him seriously. But I think a lot of Matt's listeners like it. They like the idea of standing up to the government by doing something they were already doing. They like the idea of being important enough to make the elites fearful by doing something they were already doing. They can simultaneously feel aggrieved and righteous. Aggrieved that people are threatening their way of life, and righteous that they, at least, are living the right way. This requires no effort on their part. They just have to keep doing what they've already been doing, with the difference that now they feel morally superior and like they've cheated the system. But in reality, no one cares. Be monogamous, be polyamorous, be single, be married, have kids, don't have kids. And I really hope no one is honestly taken in by the marriage and children is what they fear rhetoric, because that's a horrible reason to marry and have kids if that's not what you want. Also, if you're trying to stick it to the government, maybe don't have a government-sanctioned marriage. And that's it for this video. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.